Hey, welcome all. Coleman Report Live. Late November edition. Lance, I missed you last week.
Well, it was tough not being here, Bob. I just want everybody to know I can see. I had a little eye surgery yesterday, Bob. I was a little worried about how my eye would look today, but it's fine.
You look pretty as ever. Hey, you all know the drill and the questions. You all hopefully are downloading the certificate. Save those. That's one of the added benefits of this presentation. Let's go to the poll. Secondary market premiums are down significantly, and I want to know, do you still plan on selling those loans on the secondary market in 2019, or are you going to portfolio? And Lance, I know at your institution you sell some, but you also keep some. What is your strategy?
Actually, Bob, we portfolio.
You portfolio
right now. We're not in banks. I'm not sure. I know the premiums have an impact, Bob, but I think it also depends on whether the bank is wanting to build that small business lending portfolio, and they may want to keep. And guys, if you do the long-term return on equity model on an SBA loan, after 2 or 3 years, the return is much greater to keep it. Not trying to discourage people, because I know there's a tremendous amount of income that can be earned by selling it on the secondary market. But I think it's more a bank, does the bank need a bigger loan footing?
Yeah, and that's a tough strategy. I know Seacoast a couple of years ago switched their model from selling it to portfolioing it. And they disclosed in their annual statement, hey, we're going to do this. It's going to take a little bit hit on our earnings, but we're going to make it up in the previous years.
Well, Bob, I've seen small community banks, Bob, where the premiums from selling SBA loans on the secondary market represented almost 50% of their net profit for the year.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's that's why we do this. That's why we do this. Hey, we released on Tuesday the results from the SBA poll, and now this is anonymous, but I was just seeing, have you been criticized for any of the following? It's multiple choice, so you can go ahead and do that. But these are the common reasons loans are being screened out at Citrus Heights.
Well, guys, not only are these common reasons for screen outs, but these also, if you have an on-site or off-site review, will be critical areas that they look at when reviewing your loan files. I mean, credit elsewhere, is there life insurance, and the new 1919 with the spot. I know my bank, if I submit a small business loan to underwriting without the initials on the 1919, Bob, they'll laugh at me and send it back and tell me I have to not laugh at me, but if I don't get the initials in the right spots, I have to work, get those. Underwriting won't even touch it without those initials.
And we keep on hammering this home because these are common exceptions, and these are mistakes we're all making. I know, Lance, you were even, you were saying you get beat up for not having the right 1919 initials. We've credit elsewhere. We will continue to hammer that. And just remember, the rule is, if you are not fully collateralized, you have to address life insurance. Now, the SBA says you have to get it, but they're very specific. You have to address it, and you may choose to not implement it because of cost or whatever, but you have to address it. Third question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Bob. It's like I was saying on the 1919, those spots, I think it's questions 17, 18, 19, and 22, where the borrower has to initial. If your bank runs a loan POP, those initials are not there. SBA does a file review, they're going to ding you for not having those initials.
Do you plan to automate some of your lending dashboard practices next year?
I think this is an interesting question, Bob, and I think there's two facets to it. One question could be, are you going to automate the GGL underwriting closing process? The other question could be, are you going to automate the process for the borrower? I mean,
yeah, we're all interesting. That's actually a little bit higher than I would have expected. And I'll tell you why we asked that poll question later on. Reese has an excellent question, and the city is tearing up the sidewalk in front of one of my borrowers, and it's a candy store. He says, what if I can't turn it around and I lose my money? I've always answered the question that it will be referred to Treasury. Lance, walk us through that. What happens when it goes to Treasury, and how does the United States taxpayer get their money back?
Well, Bob, when I was deputy director at SBA, I handled a lot of Treasury referral complaints. And one of my favorite stories is I had a gentleman that would get up and enjoy some adult beverages early in the morning. And then he would call me and explain that he could not file his federal taxes. And I said, yes, you can. And then he'd say, no, I can't file my federal tax. I'm like, yes, you can. I'm like, why do you think you can't file them? He said, well, when I attempted to submit it, it said my refund would go to Treasury. And what had happened, Bob, is he had defaulted on an SBA loan. It was referred to Treasury, and every tax return he potentially can get for the rest of his life until that balance is paid off will go to Treasury and toward the SBA loan. When there is a loss on an SBA loan and it's charged off and referred to Treasury, they can use a variety of techniques to collect. One is any federal payment to the individual, i.e. a tax return, can be garnished or taken and applied to the loan. The other thing, Bob, is if you go to Vegas and you win at Vegas, ding, 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 it's going to go to Treasury. Another thing that people don't realize is your Social Security. They cannot take it all, Bob, but they can take a portion.
I was going to ask you, do you know what that percentage is?
Bob, I'm not clear on the percentage. I mean, it's under 50, but they can take a piece of it. I think Bob, this is just a guesstimate. I think it's about 30%.
I've heard the 20-25% range. The takeaway is they will take part of that. So that can be.
So, I mean, the Treasury, and this is another thing for an SBA lender, there could potentially be recoveries on your behalf by Treasury. You could get a check. The
takeaway is, don't forget, offer in compromise can be your best friend. It can solve.
The other thing, Bob, is wrapping, we've preached this for a couple of years now, wrapping up, recommending charge off and wrapping up your SBA loans is critical. SBA's now put a time frame on it, and making that recommendation for Treasury referral is critical. But Treasury referral can be a very strong collection tool.
Yeah. Well, and remember, the advantage to the offer in compromise is you may take a difficult situation and all of a sudden put that borrower and their attorney on your side in terms of how do we work this out. And, SBA preaches life after death. And then they would rather have these things wrapped up and off the books rather than go this route.
When I was deputy, Bob, it was found that a ton of SBA loans that should have been referred to Treasury were not.
Right.
And there was this effort to clean out that pool. And you can imagine, being somebody that handled congressional, there were a lot of calls about Treasury referrals.
Lance, does the lender have to do anything, or is this now automated at the SBA level?
Once you wrap it up, recommend charge off, wrap it up, recommend referral to Treasury. It's referred to Treasury. There's nothing else that you have to do.
You're out of it. You're out of it.
You're out. The collection process, if the borrower comes to you, you refer them to the U.S. Treasury.
In the dashboard, we have supplied the SBA Inspector General Fall Semi-Annual Report to Congress. A lot of fascinating stuff in there, Lance. I have enough Fraud Friday stories for the next 3 months based on this. But there are a couple highlights that I wanted to talk about. Number one, take a look at these numbers. 27 high-risk loans, and those are loans that default within 18 months over $500,000, are reviewed. And here they pulled 27 loans for $23 million. What's amazing about that, of those 27, they want to go back and deny the guarantees on 11 of those.
Well, it's SBA can find a way. And the other thing I want to tell you as SBA participant lenders is SBA reviews a purchase. We used to do what's called an IPERA review, and I think it's still improper payment review. And if SBA comes back to you and says, you owe me, if they invoice you, they determine it was an improper payment and they invoice you, you don't have to just roll over as a participant bank and pay it. I mean, you have the opportunity to appeal, to provide additional information, to disagree. And I don't recommend any bank, when there's an improper payment, that you just roll over and cut a check and say, here you go. I recommend you try to minimize the amount that you have to return.
Yeah, but don't ignore it, because
no.
it's like a bad...
Well, the problem, Bob, if they send you an invoice and you ignore it, it's like these wrap-up reports where people are starting to get invoices, and we had a poll question recently about it. And many participant banks had indicated that they had gotten an invoice. You can't ignore those, because if you ignore them, you'll probably end up losing your delegated lending authority. You have to respond to it.
We can tell stories of lenders who have.
But Bob, responding doesn't always mean cutting a check.
There you go. I think that's good advice. So if you're in this situation, pay particular attention to that PDK. Make sure you have all the documents. If you're missing anything, go back and get them, because they will be reviewed. And that's I thought that was a shocking statistic. Hey, this is an interesting one. We talk about site visits, Lance. This is why you do a site visit. We had a borrower, $680,000 for a Wendy's. And he decided to open up a retail cannabis shop, and not as described in the loan agreement. So the lender went through and took that, and actually he got a year in jail for this.
Well, he broke a federal law, Bob, and it's pretty clear in the SBA's SOP that we can't do this. Now, whether you support it or not, it's not legal on a federal level, and it cannot be used for an SBA loan. And I was speaking to a group at the University of Central Arkansas, Bob, and the youngsters wanted to hear about this. And I just used the example, and I'll throw this really quickly, the Reader's Digest version. Let's say you do an SBA loan to a borrower for a commercial building. They occupy 60% and have a lawnmower shop. They can't lease that other 40% to a cannabis or marijuana-related industry. It is an illegal loan if that's the case.
Well, not only illegal, but in this particular situation, Washington, he's going to jail for a year. So.
Oh, absolutely. It's, someday, Bob, it'll be probably legal on a federal level, and we won't have to deal with this as participant lenders. But right now, we need to know, especially in a circumstance where they're leasing some property, Bob, we need to know we need copies of the leases and to understand the businesses that are going in there.
And do the site visit.
Yeah.
Do the site visit. Okay. Next slide. This was the poll question. And again, we're just reiterating it. These are the specific percentages of how many of the files that SBA reviewed that were in error. Credit elsewhere, almost a third. And as you can see, these are pretty hot topic issues. So I believe underwriters pay close attention to these items. Hey, Paul asked a question. And the question is, how long does the process take to get a new franchise license agreement approved? Do you know?
That's a pretty incredible question, Paul. And if I had the answer, I would certainly provide it. That's one that we're going to be in Washington, D.C. next week. I'm going to try to corner somebody from headquarters and see if I can get an answer to that question.
Well, and you're doing the webinar in 2 weeks on closing the franchise loan, so we will have the answer by then. All I know, Paul, it's a manual process. I think there's one person that controls that, and it's just how quickly they can get it off his desk. Is that a fair statement, Lance?
I think it's a very fair statement, but I've not seen any SOP, CFR memorandums that said this takes this long.
Yeah, but get that process started immediately. CPR report, again, prepays are starting to go down a little bit, and we've talked about the premiums. And Bob Judge, who's the editor of this report, loves to do the charts, and you can see that that they are still paying off. And that doesn't mean these loans are bad. It means they're being refinanced out. We're going to be talking next week about the advantage of doing a fixed rate loan and how we can sell that to the secondary market. So that's interesting. We partner with Moody's, Lance. I don't know if you heard of it, and they're doing a webinar and putting the customer first about technology. It's a free webinar, so there's no cost to you. And go ahead and sign up for that and what they're doing. And they're doing some pretty creative things. And even if, obviously, they're going to be pitching their stuff, but even if they don't, at least you get an idea of what's out there and what Moody's, Live Oak Bank, other institutions are going to automate the process to make it easier for you and to get capital out to your borrowers more quickly. We pitched the summit, Lance. We've talked about what you're going to be discussing. I will see you there. And also, if you're in the area, we charge for this, but the next one, the rural event, is a free event. And if you're going to be in the area, it's worth it to get on a plane for this. Go ahead.
Bob, on the Secondary Market Summit, as you know, I'm excited about my presentation because I'm going to present a completely new idea.
Well, which is?
Well, we've always thought of workout agreements being only something you could do for loans that are in liquidation, only for loans that are not held by secondary market investors. Done a lot of work, made phone calls, did some review. And I am going to suggest that you can do a workout agreement when the loan is sold in the secondary market and the investor can still hold the loan.
Good. Well, that's why we're having you come out to discuss that. Very good. There's some of our upcoming training. Lance, I'll go back. I'm going to just push the Marina Del Rey event. Those of you who have been certified in the past, completely updated for 2019, one-day event, and you get it out of the way. And what's not to like on Marina Del Rey? I think it's right off the beach.
Well, Bob, closers are so important to protecting the SBA guarantee. I encourage anybody on the call that's a closer, see if you can get signed up and come out. And I encourage department managers and executives, send your closers. They're a critical part of the SBA lending process, and just getting updated on the closing process is a great thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of changes, and there's still going to continue to be changes regarding credit elsewhere. Hopefully that will be in place by the time for that training. Very good. And there's Lance's webinar. And this is a new event. You and I are trying to do stuff that you're not going to get from SBA, and we will have that answer for Paul. Paul, thank you for setting that up. And with that, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Have a great weekend.